Hi, everybody. Welcome to Elevated Medicine. My name is Stephanie, and I have a special guest with us today, Dr. Yusuf Salibi. He goes by JP, and he's the founder of Carolina Holistic Medicine, which sponsors us. And he also founded the Priority Health Academy. Today, we're going to be talking about a very it was a funny topic to get an email from Dr. Salibi because he's not old, but he does have gray hair, and you don't often hear gray-haired people using slang, but he said he wants to talk about FOMO versus JOMO. And even I have a few gray hairs. I had to look up what JOMO meant. So that's fear of missing out. And Dr. Salibi, would you like to tell us for this summer podcast, would you like to tell us what JOMO means?
Yeah, so JOMO is kind of a take off on FOMO, the fear of missing out, which is kind of a new Gen Z kind of thing with having to do with social media and our current, culture. And JOMO is kind of the answer to it. And we'll talk about why FOMO can be bad for you, and JOMO is the joy of missing out. So we take a negative thing and make it positive. Like, when life hands you a bag of lemons, you make lemonade. So we're going to talk about what the downside of FOMO can be for our psyche, for our mental and physical well-being. And then we'll talk about JOMO. We should shift to that to help make our life better and our brains work better and our psyche work better. Okay.
Why was this a significant topic to you to delve into now?
Well, it has to do with what's going on in our culture with AI, with social media, with the kind of dismissiveness and the the culture of canceling or the cancel culture. It's so easy to do that. It's so easy to leave a negative remark about somebody that you would just never do in person. You would never say this to a person face to face, but with the hiding behind a ridiculous screen name, you can say things about people and not be held accountable for it, and that's just bad. It shouldn't be. And the overuse of screen time and scrolling and digital um, platforms is making communications very difficult. You talk to a young kid, I've got grandkids that are, 9 and 11 years old, and they're actually good because their parents limit their time in front of a screen. But I've seen parents and their children at restaurants, and everyone's looking down and scrolling on their cell phones at the dinner table, and when the dinner was ordered but hasn't arrived yet. They're all on they're not communicating. They're all like face down, and that's terrible. And these kids grow up unable to communicate by telephone or in live conversation. They're afraid to order a pizza if they have to call in the order to, Pizza Hut. They just don't know how to do it, and they're paralyzed. And it's because they've lost practice, and they're becoming dumbed down, if you will. And that's very bad for our culture. And so I'm a big believer in digital detox, in taking a break from digital devices. And sometimes I have a full day where I turn my phone off and I don't get on my computer. Obviously, today is not one of those days, but I do usually pick one day a week. It's usually a Saturday or a Sunday where I'm like, tough if you have to text me or phone call me because I'm not touching my device.
Mhm.
And it's refreshing. And, you then are not distracted with that. So you can do other things that are important in your life. So
Mhm.
that's what prompted me to write my piece on my Substack about FOMO. And we're going to try to connect that Substack article to this recording.
Well, what exactly is happening, uh, you know, in the brain, or what's happening medically or physiologically to the
Right.
body when?
Yeah. So what's happening is just like any sort of addiction to cigarettes, to alcohol, to drugs, there is some brain chemistry going on and some effect on the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that stimulates and that releases certain hormones, stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And what that can do is that can compromise your ability for cognition, for creative thinking, for rational, critical thinking, and it becomes a big distraction
Mm,
against other things that should be important in your life, like eating proper food, like having a conversation or social interactions with other human beings, and not depend on AI or robots. I mean, there's been a lot of cases in the news lately of families suing AI companies because their children have done really crazy things, even committing suicide because they're listening to some bot on their AI that's telling them that it's okay to do
mm,
that. Or, in a case recently of a gentleman who's suing an AI because he was using medical AI, and it was the robot was telling him in such convincing language that what he was to do was the proper thing. Turned out the AI robot misdiagnosed him, and he almost died from a PE, pulmonary embolism. His chest pain and shortness of breath was not because he had a respiratory infection. It was because he had a big clot in his lung. And
oh
so
no.
things like that you have to be super careful with. And when people get so in tune with uh, checking with Chat GPT on what a doctor tells them to do, and then pushing back and saying, well, my AI told me that what you just recommended is X, Y, and Z. And it kind of shows that there's a lack of trust in medical doctors. Now, maybe to some degree that's been, a product of our own fault in losing the trust with our patients, but it's gone a little bit too far. The pendulum has swung way to the one side of almost doubting every single thing and then having to check and cross check and fact check, if you will, on AI platforms to make sure the doctor's telling you the truth. And it's unfortunate it's gotten that bad, but it looks like it's going to continue to escalate like that, is what I've been seeing in my clinical practice, this lack of trust. Even though
Mm,
our practice is designed to rebuild that trust in the fiduciary doctor patient relationship, because we've kicked out third parties from our practice, like insurance companies and government agencies and organizations, and certain book practice guidelines.
mm.
But still, we feel it because that's what these patients are doing at their other doctor's offices. You know.
So with this fear of missing out, it translating into stress is the. It sounds like you're saying that's the big issue with it, the stress
Right.
that's on us. And
So there's an
yeah, I was just going to ask you, how does that affect different things like sleep and relationships?
Yeah, so the stress hormones, like I mentioned, cortisol and the adrenalines, the catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine. So dopamine is the kind of feel-good hormone, and when you have the addiction to alcohol or to opiates or to other things like some illegal substances that people get involved with, they have this release of dopamine, which makes them kind of feel good, and that can be addictive. You've heard of the runner's high, so people that do long distance running, they secrete a lot of dopamine, and they'll run on a broken ankle.
Mm,
I mean, that's like, are you insane? But no, they feel so good. They have that high that they will put themselves in danger physically to achieve that mental like satisfaction. So that's in effect what happens when you overstimulate the brain with, constantly scrolling on your, internet, like your Instagram or your Facebook, or you get involved in these conversations and debates on a topic that's kind of a lot of drama, if you will. And people get sucked into that. And all of a sudden, you're on there for like 4 hours at
mm,
one time, you know, doing these little short YouTube videos or engaging in some kind of weird debate on some distractionary topic.
mhm,
And it can cause the release of certain stress hormones, which are detrimental. So with elevated stress hormones, it can contribute to muscle tension. So people develop, tension in their neck, and then they walk around with their shoulders touching their earlobes, and they can't relax.
Right.
Headaches, frontal headaches, stress headaches in the back of the neck, fatigue,
Mm.
feeling tired all the time, drained of energy, even some digestive disturbances like irritable bowel syndrome, so constipation, diarrhea, GI upset from the stress of it all. It can impact their concentration. It can elevate their blood pressure, and it can cause sleep disturbance because it disrupts the proper melatonin release. So those
So,
are all things that can affect both the mental and the physical part of the body.
so then that dopamine that you described, like with the runner's high, then in a way hides all of the physical stuff that's happening in the moment, and then the people don't we don't realize that our body is suffering while we're going through that. I mean, I know I had to get off Facebook, um, especially during the pandemic, and hearing what people were saying, just because it's like if you do comment, it's stressful because then you know you're like going to be in a fight, and if you don't comment, then you're having to hold all that frustration in. So I just realized for my own health, it was better for me just to not read the things in the first place. I
Yeah,
couldn't.
yeah, you can get drawn in, and then it's like a slippery slope.
Yeah,
Once you,
and my relationships were important to me, and I didn't want to lose them all. It became like, what's more important here? To be right, to save people like I'm some sort of rescuer, or to maintain these relationships that have gone back for years. It's like you have to make some kind of decision about that.
right,
Mm.
right, and if you have your notifications on, I was in with a patient the other day, a new patient, and their notification was on. It was a loud dinging sound, and all through, and I said, can you silence those? It was totally unnecessary because they were ignoring them. So if you're not going to ignore an emergency notification, I mean, I understand if you leave your kids with a babysitter, you may want to leave that notification on in case there's an emergency. But if you're at a doctor's office, turn your cell phone off, turn your notifications off. It's very distracting. And it's like, people are so used to it, they just ignore it anyway. So why have it disturb someone else?
Yeah.
And like, when you like something or feel compulsion to respond and like something or look at a new post, these are little bursts of dopamine that happen. And what happens, this reward will be intermittent rather than constantly happening. And so it reinforces this like compulsive checking behavior. Is what they call it. So you constantly have to grab for your phone. They did a study recently where they took a group of people and they told them to put their cell phones down while they sat there and just daydreamed or meditated or something. And the vast majority within an hour couldn't stand it. They had to reach for their phone.
Oh no.
So this is a big problem. And there are things that I believe are intentional for us not to leave our phones far from us. This double authentication thing, when you log in, oh, like check your cell phone for a text with the security number. I mean, if your phone's in the other room, you have to get up and go get it. So, they want you to keep your phone right by your side to answer these requests to confirm a code that will allow you to log in. So there's that, and I think is not so much for safety because people still can hack into your stuff. So it's not
Yeah.
working great, but it's causing you to not leave your cell phone um, and have it right by your side, and
Mm.
that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
So this constant repetitive compulsive checking and scrolling, that all will lead to an addiction in the brain.
Hmm.
And so it's a psychological distress, and then it can lead to physical distress, as I mentioned before. So what it can do is that it can increase anxiety and depression, loneliness. There's a comic that I like, Sebastian Maniscalco, and he makes fun about taking a selfie. He said people have hundreds of selfies of themselves in the mirror, in the bathroom, or they take a selfie, and he calls it. He says, "I'm taking a lonely," because if you don't have a person to take a picture of you, that's bad, right? And if you have a whole bunch of 150 selfies on your cell phone, there's a problem there, right? So loneliness, low life satisfaction, decrease in self-esteem, emotional exhaustion, and burnout. Those are all psychological things that can happen from overusing social media and engaging too much in social media, notifications, scrolling, that kind of thing.
Okay, that's gonna stick with me. I'm taking a lonely. Oh my gosh. So yeah, in the comparison, you said in your article you were talking about how it messes with your self-perception to see everybody's good news all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you hear people posting, "Oh, I'm in Mexico and I'm having a grand time," well, if you're having such a great time, why are you interrupting that experience to post something on social media?
Yeah,
You
why?
or people that take pictures of their food and post it online, like, "Oh, here, really?" I mean, how many thousands of pictures of plates of food at restaurants nobody's going to remember are on people's cell phones? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it affects your sleep because it affects the release of melatonin at night. And people have a hard time falling asleep and
Mm,
staying asleep. And when you lose sleep and restorative sleep, it actually amplifies things like anxiety and depression. And it's hard to gain that back. The recovery time for getting your melatonin back on track can be a little bit lengthy, you
mm,
know. So,
mm.
yeah.
Well, I forget. I read something a while back about it was like a health psychologist who talked about I think it was like 45% of people who had high stress uh, they could, well, I guess she talked about how to turn that stress could be good or bad. It could build resilience by your body acknowledging it as a challenge to grow into, or it could harm health if you believe. She said it was all dependent on their belief system. They could have the same amount of high stress, but if they believed that it was doing something good for their body, um, it did. But if they thought, "Oh, this is harming me," then it didn't. I think what Kelly.
Yes.
What,
Yeah, so I know what you're referencing. I can't remember the specifics, but there's good stress and bad stress.
okay.
There's the good kind of stress that gets your body to react in a very positive way and maybe fix things. And then there's bad stress, which just erodes at your health and mental health. So yeah, you've got to have it in balance.
Hmm.
Like I said, there's good and bad stress. Not all stress is bad, but you know, a lot of it is, and it's self-induced. You know, we kind of do it to ourselves in a way. But I think that the takeaway message is that we need to develop deeper in-person relationships, focus on personal values instead of comparison of our life to somebody else's life. And that's a lot of what these internet influencers do. They're like braggadocious about, look at how great my life is. You know, these kind of programs on YouTube, and they draw people in with kind of some ridiculous stuff, or these reality TV shows, which are kind of trying to get people to be a little bit envious of their lifestyle. And it's not, look at some of these people on reality TV shows or some of these influencers. They're messed up. They're
Hmm.
messed up people. Do we really want to emulate them? Probably not if we really sit back and think about it. Plus, it's very distractionary if you're someone who's into, prayer or meditation, reflection, even daydreaming. We don't know how to daydream anymore. Again, it's like that cohort of people. They couldn't sit tight for 15 minutes before they're reaching for their cell phones to stimulate them because they couldn't do it on their own. So that's
Well, in building relationships as kind of a way out of this, what I know, what does that have to do with oxytocin? I know that's something a lot of people have heard about with the bonding and with the mother and infant. How does that improve as you connect with people?
Yeah, so oxytocin is a peptide that's the bonding peptide. It's used after the birth of a child. That oxytocin is released so that the mother and the child will bond. Sometimes it's used if there's a separation, if the child is premature and has to go into an incubator, doesn't have time to physically bond with the mom, sometimes they will use oxytocin in both the mother and the infant, the newborn, to kind of get that bonding. It's also used in couples. So couples that grow apart, sometimes oxytocin is used nasal spray or sublingual applications to help bond couples. Sometimes it's referred to as the women's Viagra because it does increase sexual desire and bonding and love. And couples that have grown apart and don't spoon anymore, they dose it up and then all of a sudden they're spooning again when they
Oh,
fall
wow.
asleep. And after an orgasm, after intercourse, and there's an orgasm, there's a huge spike in the amount of oxytocin that's released. So that's one of several different neurotransmitters. And there's a lot of stuff going on in something called the ACC. I'm not going to get into that. It's a little deep, but you can read about it in my article. The amygdala part of the brain is kind of a more primitive part, and then the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, it also plays a part. And I've mentioned these in my article. You can kind of read about them in more detail. But there's a lot involved. But the take home for my folks, I think, who are listening to this, is that we need to transition from FOMO to JOMO, the joy of missing out. So don't feel bad that you're missing out on this party or this rave party or this concert or hooking up with friends at a bar or having to respond and like something or thumbs up something, that is detrimental. So if you can go to the joy of missing out, in other words, when you miss those things, that might be better for the neural circuitry to happen and for you to develop more interpersonal skills. That might be a good thing. So there's joy in that, hence the JOMO
Mhm.
reference.
So, like, transfer the energy that you're spending, the energy that goes out of you from being stressed about comparisons or not being part of things, transfer that into nurturing your body and saying, what do I need? If I was my own parent, what would I say? What would compassion for myself tell me that I need right now? Like, to stretch my neck muscles or get some water with lemon, or is that kind of what you're saying? Put that energy into something that benefits you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like my wife and I tend to walk either really early in the morning or in the evening when the sun goes down and the humidity is less in the summer, so it's tolerable. So we'll walk and we'll leave our cell phones at home. I mean, there's no need to take them with us. We don't want to be distracted by them. We're out in nature. We're out in a very nice evening walk with a nice breeze, and we want to take it in and have a conversation. We don't want to, and I see people walking their dogs, and they've got their cell phones in front of them. They're
Mm,
either listening to a podcast or they're looking at their cell phones, and I'm hoping that they don't trip over something and fall into the lake or whatever. But it's a shame. I always feel sorry for people that can't take a break from that. So
mm,
I'm an advocate for a digital detox, take a day, take a weekend, get to the point where you can sit and daydream. That's a lost art.
mm.
And that has some beneficial effects on the brain and the body when you can do that.
Yeah, in your life, because if you can daydream and think about what you want and what you want to build, those things come to be, starting with the thought.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
watched you do that over and over.
Yeah. Well, I have my routine. I have my routine about how I meditate and pray and all that stuff. And it's really, I think, helped me personally, and it's helped the practice because trying to introduce that into part of an intervention I give to my patients. We can talk about dietary supplements, we can talk about reducing the polypharmacy in their lives and their pill burden, and we can talk about lifestyle changes. And that's part of one of them is, meditation, prayer. I don't want to preach to somebody and maybe convert them to my faith. That's not the point of that. The point is whatever their belief system's in, and if they actually act upon it, can be very beneficial for their mental health.
Mhm. Well, that's very good. And I'm glad that I'm not lonely on the screen today, that you're with me. And I know this will benefit anybody who listens to it just to reevaluate how they're spending their time and what it's doing to their body. So thank you for sharing this. And for those of you who want to read more about it, Dr. Salibi's Substack, you can just Google that. And the title what is it, FOMO versus JOMO? Or
Yeah, I think it's just if they go to internal search for my Substack and just type in the search FOMO, FOMO, it'll bring up the article.
Okay, great. All right. Well, we look forward to hearing more from you, Dr. Salibi, and we hope that you enjoy your afternoon.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie.
Bye bye.